Okay, the first round of the World Rapid and Blitz tournament, and this is the rapid portion, first round, and well, of course, the first game we look at is Magnus Carlsen. He's playing here against the experienced Bulgarian Grandmaster Kiril Georgiev. You should be familiar with him. He beat Kasparov in a match in 1988 in the World Blitz Championship, which was held in St. John. Quite an extraordinary event. And I encourage you to have a look at that on YouTube. You can find the video. It's quite fun to look at. But onto the game. It's Carlsen white and Kiril Georgiev with black. And Carlsen opened with d4. I think his most frequent opening move as of late. e6, knight f3. So black is going to play here a solid Queen's Gambit. Declined, bishop e7, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4. And yeah, here he plays b6. If I'm not mistaken, that's I think that's called the Lasker, isn't it? Where's the Lasker with knight e4? Could be the Tartakower. I should know that. But anyway, b6 is a solid option for black here. Bishop e2, bishop e7. Yeah, the bishop seems more natural on d3 perhaps, but seems like Carlsen is content with a solid slow maneuvering game here. And once the bishop goes to b7, he takes on f6. And the idea is both that, well, after you take an f6, maybe this guy is not very active because of the wall of pawns on the black squares, and also because this bishop already moved to b7, it doesn't have access to this diagonal which we just opened when we took on d5, and black took back with his e-pawn, which was here. So castles, queen e7. So to free up his game for the bishops, black must play c5, which he eventually did. After queen b3, we're attacking pawn on d5, which explains rook d8, rook d1, and now eventually c5. And the idea here is to open up for the bishop on f6. Carlsen took on c5, and here Georgiev took on c3. Of course, if you take back on c5, I see nothing wrong with just taking the pawn on d5. White is up the pawn, no problems. Attacking the queen, and if it takes, the main problem with taking, of course, is the rook is hanging here on a8, so no time to capture the b2 pawn. So therefore, first Georgiev took on c3, queen took, b takes c5, and now rook c1. And we see that now black has the hanging pawns, the so-called hanging pawns, which often arise from a isolated queen pawn position. You could imagine this pawn having been isolated and something was exchanged on c6, b takes c6. That's most often how we get these hanging pawns. But the thing with them, either they're an asset or a weakness. White will try to attack them, while black will try to find the opportune moment to, in some cases, play d4 and get some active chances. Sometimes you can just attack them as well and hope that white can't really generate anything. Knight d7 was played, queen a3. Just keeping this diagonal pressure on the c-pawn still, which is now pinned to the queen. So we unpinch with queen f6, rook fd1. Then you notice white simply puts the rooks on the half-open files to attack these pawns. But as of yet, nothing concrete coming out of it. White can always increase the pressure. You know, we could put this knight at d3, even on f4. attacks this pawn, but then later the bishop might hop to f3, also putting more pressure here. But on the other hand, if we start maneuvering too much, we also have to be careful about black freeing up with a move like d4 at some point. So queen b6 was played here. Everything staying under control for black. h3. When in doubt, make luft. So that's what Magnus does. And rapid chess sometimes is about keeping a time edge and making quick moves. So h3 fits the bill. Black to move, he goes a5. And now white starts maneuvering the knight. The knight wants to go to d3 to put more pressure on c5, and maybe from there to f4 like we talked about earlier. And here after rook ac8, Carlsen made an interesting decision. Played queen b3. And this looks counterintuitive after takes, which happened in the game. I mean, you got these isolated double pawns here on the b file, and looks like black might be able to attack them, but turns out it's not so easy. And also white has opened up the a file for his rooks to attack the a5 pawn, and still we have these pawns on c5 and d5 to attack. Georgiev played here g6. One idea of that move might be to have the f5 move available if you play bishop g4 at some point. Bishop b5. Now it turns out it's not so easy to attack these pawns here. And the bishop on b5. It's actually a little bit annoying piece for black right here. So does white want to take on d7? Probably, since he moves the knight. So we'll take b6. If we take on d7, looks like we get quick pressure. Rook c3, rook c1, knight d3. Moves like this. There's big pressure on the c5 pawn. So knight b6, rook a1, rook a8, protecting the hanging pawn. Knight d3, rook d to c8. Here knight f4 comes into consideration, but Carlsen went with knight to e5, king g7, and now rook a3, getting ready to double on the a file. King f6, knight g4, and it turns out that this was kind of a typical Magnus game, where he just holds a slight edge into the endgame. And yeah, steers it home. King g7, otherwise we can think about taking on h6 maybe. Rook d to a1, attacking the pawn. And there's no good way to defend it, so black goes for the counterplay here with c4. But white takes on a5. White actually has to be a little bit careful here. If we start by taking, and now we take, I have a feeling this pin could be annoying. And now bishop c6 is threatened unless I'm missing something. Can't really move the rook, and I mean this is the only way to do something, but we lose this pawn. Even though we get knight e5 now, c3 is becoming dangerous. Something like this. So he took immediately on a5, allowing black to take on b3. But now he takes on a8. And if we take with anything other than the rook, I have a feeling we'll just, let's say with the bishop for instance, I'll just play rook a3 and we pick up the b3 pawn. That's my feeling, and white will be a pawn up. There's no danger on the back rank. King always has a flight square. Yeah, this looks like white should be winning a pawn. I mean d4 might be an idea. If takes, you want to play bishop d5, attack this pawn and play rook c2. But I guess we can just take now. And then next move, exchange this pawn. So that's my feeling as to why he played rook takes a8, now an exchange. Now this knight on g4 entered the equation here with knight e5, stopping, yeah, for instance, knight c4, which might have been a threat. Attacking this pawn, and if white takes on c4, then this pawn takes, and then pawn is going to c3, so knight e5, king f6, and now knight d7 with jack. Black has to exchange, and now it turns out that this pawn is simply too difficult to protect. King e5, bishop back, and naturally when you're down a pawn in an endgame, you try to exchange as many pawns as possible to yeah, just so that there's only one pawn remaining, and you hope that that's not enough. But bishop takes b3, white is off the pawn, f6, king f1, g5, and probably this should be just winning for white. King d3, king e1, king c2, and we can easily defend the pawn here with b3. Note that not b4, and king c3, and the pawn drops. So b3, everything seems to be under control. Takes too long for black to maneuver the bishop to even threaten this pawn. King d3, bishop c4 check. And this gives a square to the white king now, king d2. And like that here, f5, bishop d3, bishop d7, b4, and notice how, yeah, the pawn and the bishop combine here to keep the black king away from attacking the pawn. f4 was played. And yeah, it's hard to suggest anything good here, but it looks like it's lost after f4. I mean, if he does nothing, white can think about f4 and then just start pushing the pawn. And the thing is, once the king starts to chase it, we can enter with our king and win the pawn ending. So after f4, Magnus took on f4, bishop takes h3, pawn to f5, king e5, b5, this pawn is running. Now we're too late. If we take here, we're simply outside the square. You have to be you have to reach this corner, but you can't. So bishop d2, b6, bishop b7, king e3, g4, bishop e4. And this you can't take. And then I start running. And if you block with the bishop, then it's overloaded. You can push one of the pawns, and once the bishop takes, the other one queens. If king takes, you take the bishop, we win. So bishop e4, nice move. Georgiev has to play bishop c8, and now f6, bishop takes, and king f4. Before we play b7. The f5 pawn was going to be lost anyway. Once you play b7, and takes, and king takes. So Magnus played f6 first, just to keep the black king further away. King here, h5. And now it's difficult for black to do anything. King g6, bishop c6. Bishop e8 is coming here at some point, and the pawns are going to drop off. Easy win, so Magnus on the board, 1 out of 1. And I believe we have 15 rounds, so long way to go.